30 days, which include Houston-based KTRK. We'll discuss this and more of today's top headlines. I'm Ernie Manouse.
And I'm Celeste Díaz Schurman. We'll also hear from public theologian Sean Palmer, who will discuss the intersection of politics and religion in the latest installment of my Cold Coffee series.
And we'll also have a conversation with Libby Ward, writer, speaker, and advocate who's redefining the motherhood narrative.
And as always, we want to hear from you. Give us a call or send us a text at 713-440-8870 or email us at talk@hellohouston.org. Don't forget, you can watch us live on YouTube by going to houstonpublicmedia.org.
Hello Houston is made possible in part by founding sponsors John Bradshaw and Kathy Sanders, by Metro, and by gifts from listeners like you.
Live from NPR News, I'm Lakshmi Singh. Early morning trading saw world oil prices soar as high as $126 a barrel over fears of an escalation in the U.S.-Iran standoff in the Strait of Hormuz, site of competing blockades that have set off a historic energy crisis. As NPR's Aya Batrawi reports, there's no sign of relief for global markets in light of the latest responses from the leaders of Iran and the U.S.
President Trump has rejected an Iranian proposal to open the Strait of Hormuz in exchange for the U.S. lifting its blockade on Iranian vessels. Under Iran's proposal, nuclear talks would be delayed to a later stage. Trump told Axios he sees the U.S. blockade as, quote, somewhat more effective than the bombing, and that he does not want to lift the blockade on Iranian ships because he does not want Iran to have a nuclear weapon. Iran says its nuclear program is for peaceful energy purposes. Trump told Axios it was time for Iran to, quote, cry uncle and say we give up. Iran's lead negotiator Mohammad Ghalibaf wrote on X that oil prices would soon hit $140 on the back of the, quote, junk advice Trump's getting from people like Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent about the naval blockade. Aya Batrawi, NPR News, Dubai.
Well, oil prices have settled back down to around $114 a barrel, and despite the war, the U.S. economy's expanded. The Commerce Department reports modest growth at a rate of 2% in the first quarter. The Dow's risen 625 points, or more than 1.2% at last check. President Trump says he is considering reducing the number of American troops in Germany, where the U.S. maintains its largest military presence in Europe. S.B. Nicholson reports the president's announcement comes after German Chancellor Friedrich Merz criticized Washington for having a lack of strategy over Iran.
More than 36,000 U.S. troops are stationed in Germany, which is home to the most U.S. military installations in Europe and to one of the USA's largest overseas Air Force bases in Ramstein. President Trump says he will, quote, decide shortly whether to cut the number of active service personnel. Earlier this week, Chancellor Friedrich Merz remarked Iran had, quote, humiliated the USA with its negotiating skills.
Maine's Governor Janet Mills is suspending her Democratic campaign for the Senate seat long held by Republican Susan Collins. Kevin Miller with Maine Public Radio reports.
Numerous polls have shown Mills badly trailing her chief Democratic rival, Graham Plattner, headed into the state's June 9th primary. But Mills said in a statement that while she had the drive to continue her campaign, she lacked the financial resources she would need. Mills, who is Maine's first female governor, was recruited by Senate Minority Leader Chuck Schumer to run against Collins, who is widely regarded as one of the most vulnerable Republican incumbents this year. Now, the Democratic establishment will likely have to rally around Plattner, a Marine Corps veteran and oysterman who's been drawing large crowds since last summer with his populist anti-establishment message. For NPR News, I'm Kevin Miller in Augusta, Maine.
This is NPR.
Live from News 88.7 in Houston, I'm Matt Harab. An investigation is underway after a worker was killed when a tank of liquid asphalt burst open yesterday. News 88.7's Tom Perumian has the latest.
The employee of Martin Asphalt was encased in 3 feet of material when the tank exploded, showering the surrounding area with black smoke and hot black tar from the sky. It happened at the Martin plant near Galveston Road and Spencer Highway in South Houston Wednesday afternoon. Another employee's car became mired in tar while they were trying to get away from the site of the tank rupture. They escaped unharmed. Martin Asphalt says a comprehensive internal investigation is slated to get underway. Cleaning up around the site is in progress. I'm Tom Perumian, News 88.7.
The owner of a chop shop has been busted for selling stolen auto parts and cars in Missouri City. This after a traffic stop led authorities to the location. Authorities say that police were called after a suspicious vehicle with no license plates were seen dropping off car parts at a store. That driver was arrested on a warrant for unauthorized use of a motor vehicle and possession of stolen car parts. The owner of the shop he was dropping parts off to had 6 stolen vehicles on his lot, according according to authorities, and he was charged with possession of stolen property. The amount of seaweed washing up on Galveston shores has increased over the past few weeks, bringing a fishy smell along with it. Hal Needham is an extreme weather scientist based in Galveston. He says the increase in seaweed is nothing out of the ordinary, especially this time of year.
People have said that they've had a smell of it, but it is also natural and it does help build the beach. And it's just something, it's very dynamic. It can kind of come and go. So definitely it's something we're going to keep a close eye on, but we're still hoping for a great season all along the Texas coast.
Officials with the Galveston Park Board say seaweed buildup has to meet certain depth and height thresholds before they can relocate it to the dunes. Rain is on the way later tonight into tomorrow. We could get some flooding in isolated spots tomorrow, depending on how heavy it gets. It's 82 degrees right now. I'm Matt Harrop, News 88.7.
Support for NPR comes from NPR stations. Other contributors include Fisher Investments. Fisher's dedicated team of specialists provide resources on investing, retirement income, estate planning, and more. Learn more at FisherInvestments.com. Investing in securities involves the risk of loss.
Live from Houston Public Media and News 88.7, it's Hello Houston, an open forum on today's biggest stories affecting Houston and beyond. Call now, 713-440-8870, or let us know your thoughts on today's topics by emailing us at talk@hellohouston.org. And now your hosts for Hello Houston, Ernie Manouse and Celeste Díaz Schurman.
Hello, Houston.
Hello, Ernie.
Hello, Celeste. Yes, one more day, and then we all cry.
Yeah, it's been wonderful to see the amount of people that have reached out to me and have said, that they're going to miss me, that they're also excited. And one of my favorite things is whenever I'll see, some of my colleagues around here, they'll say, congratulations. And that really is so nice because I am sad. This is my home. I love Houston Public Media. I love Houston. So it was a very hard decision. And so many Houstonians know and understand those moments when a job takes you somewhere else.
Yeah.
And
brings you here.
So many people, because there are so many industries. We have the medical industry. We have, oil and gas and energy. We have tech here, entertainment and theater.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So we have a lot of people coming and going in this city. And I think a lot of people can relate to finding a place you absolutely love and making that sacrifice. Transitions.
For those of you that we jumped into the story
Wonderful.
without explaining it, in case you don't listen every day, so Celeste has announced that she is leaving the show because her family is relocating, and so she's got to go with the family. As much as we've tried to break up the family to keep you, her husband isn't going for it, so we got to let her go.
No, but I especially love the Hello Houston community because, we set out to do exactly what we feel like we're doing, and that's building a community. And and we'll have more tomorrow. We'll have more tomorrow.
Anyway, you know what today is? I know we used to always do the day, and they kind of like, we're not doing it. But I think this is an important one, and my British computer guy also thinks so. He put it up on our YouTube chat, which is a thriving community of folks. So if you want to join in the chat over there, just look for us. You can find us by going to HoustonPublicMedia.org, clicking the button. It'll take you over to the YouTube. But today is National Adopt a Pet from a Shelter Day. And I bring that up because that's so important, especially it's getting nicer out. And a lot of people are thinking, hey, I wish we had a dog. I wish we had an animal, a pet we could take out, take for walks. When doing that, think about adopting a pet. Mm-hmm. It's so important. I feel like Bob Barker. Remember when he used to do that on the Price? Well, you wouldn't remember it, but he used to do that on The Price is Right. Always spade and neuter your pets, but it's important. And if you're thinking about getting a pet, think about adopting.
Ernie, you have kitty cats, right?
I do have kitty cats. One came from a shelter.
Yeah.
I've told this story before. I was doing a radio show, and the next segment, I was a guest on a show, was the Pet of the Week. And it was the cutest little kitten, tiny little thing. And they kept teasing me about take the cat home with you. I was like, no. But they took a picture. And when I got home, they had posted it on Instagram. And I saw it and I was like, oh, and I called them and like, it's still available. That little tiny kitten that could sleep in a shoe now weighs 20 pounds and owns my house, just so you know. Be careful what you adopt.
He's paying Ernie's mortgage now. So.
Yeah, he's got a part-time job. Actually, he has his own Instagram page.
What is it?
Scout the Fat Cat, I think is what it's called, because he got big.
We don't have pets, even though my kids are really campaigning for a puppy or a kitty, and I'm just like, I'm.
Yeah, they take time. But you had a yard too.
Right.
This house. Do you know where you're gonna live in California yet?
Yeah, so we'll be in Bakersfield, and we found a home where, again, as a lot of people know, we're gonna be there probably 2 to 3 years, and we're hoping we'll be back in Houston, and
So are we. And I also know that so would probably Sean Palmer, who was your minister at your church, and he's joining us today.
He's no longer there. He's moved on as well. Right. We all experience change in some form.
Well, not all of us. Some of us just sit here year in and year out.
You get to experience a change of hosts, Ernie.
Yes, that's the change I get.
Yes. Fabulous conversation. I found myself, and I think having conversations where just in general, people keep asking, how do Christians handle, this kind of viral flashpoint that we're in, where images of AI, or, and so we had a really good conversation. And I think that it's about just power dynamics at play between our elected officials as well as our religious leaders, and where, if and how those intersections happen.
Well, you'll be having that conversation in just a little bit, along with an honest talk on motherhood, coming up a little later in the show. And then if you find you can't get a good breath these days because you can't take a moment to breathe, guess what? You're not alone. Fort Bend is having some issues with air quality, and we're going to talk about that and what they're doing to gauge where we are with that. And it is Thursday, current obsessions. So start sending them in to us now at talk@hellohouston.org. We want to know what's taking up all your free time when you're supposed to be going to bed at night, but you're looking at it on the phone or watching it on TV or listening to it. What is it? What are you obsessed with? What, when you meet someone, do you have to tell them about? We want to know. Once again, talk@hellohouston.org or call or text 713-440-8870. All of that said, so now we can go into the news of the day. Take it away.
The Federal Communications Commission, or the FCC, is ordering several Disney-owned TV stations, including Houston's KTRK, to refile their broadcast license application within 30 days. The FCC says Disney may have violated federal communications law, including rules against unlawful discrimination. The filings are due by May 28th. The move comes amid political backlash over a joke by late-night host Jimmy Kimmel on ABC, which is owned by Disney. President Donald Trump has called for Kimmel to be fired. KTRK declined to comment. Disney says it stands by its content and is confident it meets legal and constitutional standards. Now is the time to join us on Hello Houston. Is this about holding broadcasters accountable or crossing a line into free speech? Give us a call or send us a text, 713-440-8870.
I am going to assume nothing much is going to change, and that I think it's just not even a scare tactic. I think it's a remember we're in charge kind of threat to stations, and that's what bothers me about it.
Yeah, and I think we need to take a step back here, right? I mean, the situation really goes beyond one joke or one show. It just continues to raise that broader question about how broadcast media is regulated and where free speech fits into that framework. I mean, the FCC does have a defined role in overseeing broadcasting license and making sure it's enforcing rules and regulation, especially federal rules. However, I think we are at a tension point here where the concern is when the government is calling for actions that will influence media content. We are in dangerous waters when that starts to happen, especially when when we look at political figures. And, I think that this is just more broadly highlighting this ongoing conversation about public trust in the media. And I think it's very easy for elected officials to say it is us against the media and not understand why the media and the role that news has in our democracy.
Mm-hmm. I also think it comes at a very interesting point when there is an ongoing struggle to bring eyes and ears to traditional media.
Mm-hmm.
And when you have these kind of threats and things happening, I think quickly the powers that be will realize you're not silencing the voices, you're just moving them somewhere else. And so I am surprised the amount of time we have seen where the major media entities, companies, have kowtowed to these as opposed to holding strong, because I think what they're going to do is lose audience share, and ultimately that's business share. And I'm surprised that the business mind hasn't. I think the business mind is clicking in, thinking they want to be in a good place with the government and that, but they're going to have to look at the bottom line, and they're going to see it's going to hurt their bottom line to allow this to happen.
See, that's an interesting take, right? Mm-hmm. That you're saying that you don't think that this will silence the voice, whereas I actually do think, because people can get there, it'll just push people to different places.
Right, different platforms.
But I do think it is, and I'm trying to think of the word, it is eroding, I think, the pillar of free press. I do think it is eroding the fabric that holds us together when we look at news, when you are pushing it out to social media, where anybody can be an independent journalist, where anybody can have, because when you work within a news organization, you are accountable and you are following rules. There are checks and balances. You can't just pitch a story and go out and do it and post it, and Houston Public Media is going to stand behind it. Mm-hmm. We follow specific journalistic standards. And so I do think when we have elected officials causing people to doubt the media, doubt healthcare, it is eroding some of the pillars that hold our democracy together.
Yeah, I think we're both talking about we're talking about this topic in two different lanes, as often is with a lot of the topics we talk about on the show. There's different ways to approach it, because what I'm thinking in my, and I agree with what you're saying, is that Jimmy Kimmel, if he's taken off the air, do you really think we'll never hear from Jimmy Kimmel again? No, he will pop up on another platform, another place, an independent source. He will stream himself. Don Lemon left CNN. We still hear about Don Lemon.
Right.
That sounded really dismissive of Don Lemon. I didn't mean it that way. But also, when Colbert goes off, do you really think we won't hear from Colbert again? I think he will. He has a brand that has value, and he will find a place for it.
Sure.
But I think CBS is going to lose audience share. I think if Kimmel were to go away, ABC would lose it. Ultimately, ABC, up through Disney, up through whoever owns whatever owns which conglomerate that's taking over what now and when. And I think that's of concern, or should be of more concern, to these companies. I think, and then the flip to what you're talking about is I'm thinking validity of sources and information. And we were able to rely on national media outlets for the most part to vet what they report. CBS News had a certain standard that we felt then eroded when they had their changeover and the positioning they've taken and the shift that they've been in. So I think we're in a troubling time when we know where to go and where to get the right
That's right.
sources.
713-440-8870. We are right at time. So let's go to Andrea from West Houston. Andrea, welcome to Hello Houston. What is your comment or question?
Hi, yes. I just wanted to say that the FTC is really kowtowing to the president. I think they're feeling the pressure. I don't know if they're, these people, they're big jobs. These are big money jobs. If they're afraid they're going to get fired, I don't know what it is, but we've already been down this road, and America balked at the ideal of firing Jimmy Kimmel. He is no more brash or no different than any other commentator that's been commenting through the years. It's like the comments for former presidents, either in joking or just in criticism, has been no stronger but no other president has acted like this. No other president has gotten down in the ring or in the muck and mire and actually went even bothered to comment on it because they were busy running the country and running, and participating in the world government. So if they fire him again, it was very difficult. But we stopped recording. We did drop our subscription plan to Hulu and to I think it was one of the other brands that are by Disney. Oh, Disney Plus. Yep. So those things really, if they do it, it may not matter to them to lose a few little humble households like myself, but it is definitely the people are aware. We see what's going on, and I'm speaking for the people. We're definitely against any more control, any more banning of anybody.
Andrea, thank you for giving voice to so many with your call. We appreciate it. 713-440-8870. Lee from Sharpstown, what's on your mind?
Hey, Ernie. First, I'm not a Democrat, and I'm not a Jimmy Kimmel fan, but this bullying by the administration is already backfired once. The last time it happened, Jimmy Kimmel's ratings went up, and I'm sure they will again. But I think the bigger question is, when was the last time you watched TV on an antenna? What happens if they just decide, if KTRK decides, you know what, we're not going to file because we're just going to keep staying on cable TV or streaming because that's where all the users are. The FCC is not a great club. And once they realize that, this whole thing just takes power away from the current administration and makes them look foolish. It's crazy.
Yeah. Lee, thank you for those points of view. I think, once again, you speak for many. 713-440-8870. Kevin, what's on your mind?
Yeah, so when we talk about independent media versus, the big media, either way, whether it all goes to streaming or not, it's so important for education, for schools, high schools specifically, and colleges, to teach rhetoric skills, right? So that people, the educated public, knows if they're seeing news or if they're seeing opinion, knows that this is independent media or this is big media, but we can understand what spin is. We can understand that this is coming from one ideology or a different, or it's neutral because we're using fact-based language, and we can see and understand things for ourselves instead of just following in our own echo chamber that the algorithm has put in front of our face.
Thank you, Kevin. Yeah, I agree with Kevin 100%. And what he's talking about is media literacy. Yep. And more than ever, we need to be understanding media literacy. Right here in Houston Public Media, we actually have a role, Connie Hill, who runs education programs helping students understand media literacy, just that.
Yeah, it's funny. I wrote down the same thing when Kevin was talking, media literacy. We had a class in it when I was in. Yep. Yes, communications was my major in school. I don't think everyone has that. But it was like how to interpret what you're being fed by the media and how to understand it. So fascinating. We also had a comment from Rezin who said, I hold 0 subscriptions to any media online, only channel membership. Thank you, Andrea, Lee, and Kevin for calling in and joining the conversation.
Coming up on Hello Houston, my conversation with public theologian Sean Palmer. We'll discuss the intersection of politics and religion. This is News 88.7. Stay with us.
Meet Dio Choco. We just took his keys for the day and gave him a Ride Metro fare card. This is his story. Visit ridemetro.org/Choco to find out where is Choco.
Coming up on The Splendid Table.
Join us for The Splendid Table. You can hear that Sunday at noon here on News 88.7.
I'm Jesse Thorne. On Bullseye, I'll talk with Kristen Shaw from Bob's Burgers and What We Do in the Shadows. She followed her childhood dream.
I knew I wanted to be an actress. I mean, it's so stupid. What a stupid thing for me to want to do.
Plus, Riz Ahmed, the Oscar winner and rapper, is taking on Hamlet. That's on the next Bullseye from MaximumFun.org and NPR.
Bullseye, Tonight at 10.
Picture a placid river out maybe in Colorado somewhere, fly fishing galore. Now picture inflation.
The retail side of the business this year has been very slow. We've seen a definite drop year over year.
I'm Kai Rizdal, the fly fishing microeconomy, next time on Marketplace.
You can hear Marketplace at 6:30 this evening on News 88.7. Support comes from Metro. World Cup planning includes transit improvements intended to serve Houston after the final match. Metro provides bus, rail, and paratransit service and continues mobility enhancements across the region. More at ridemetro.org/Metro Now.
Symphony presenting Joshua Bell Returns, The Elements in Concert. Grammy Award-winning violinist Joshua Bell performs a multimedia exploration of love, death, and the hereafter. May 7th, 9th, and 10th at Jones Hall, HoustonSymphony.org.
And now back to Hello Houston. To comment on today's topics, call or text 713-440-8870 or email us at talk@hellohouston.org. Now back to Ernie Manouse and Celeste Díaz Schurman.
There's a moment happening right now at the intersection of politics, religion, and culture that feels different, a very modern flashpoint, where a sitting president, the Pope, and even an AI-generated imagery are all part of the same conversation. It's spreading fast, sparking reaction, and it's raising bigger questions about faith and power in public life. But if we take a step back, this isn't entirely new. So maybe the question isn't what's happening, but what it reveals. I sat down with public theologian Sean Isaac Palmer to talk about exactly that and where this moment fits in a much longer story. Here's a snippet of our conversation. On today's Cold Coffee, I am sitting with a friend, Sean Palmer, a public theologian, and we're going to be chatting about this viral flashpoint that we are in right now, when the intersections of politics and religion really are at the forefront of the conversation. Sean, thanks for joining me today on Cold Coffee.
Well, thanks, Celeste, for having me. Look forward to the conversation.
Yeah, as I mentioned, we have seen a lot of back and forth between this current administration and the Pope. And I'm curious from your perspective, just right off the bat, what as a religious leader in a community, in a very diverse community, that signals to you?
Well, it's been a really interesting interaction between the two of them. It's actually something that doesn't happen all of that often. You can go back through history and look at popes having conversation with, say, like George W. Bush during Afghanistan and Iraq, but it's not something that happens very often. And the reason it doesn't happen all that often is throughout history, there are some exceptions, like in World War II, for instance. Generally speaking, popes are against war, and everybody knows that.
Right.
And so it's an interesting conversation to have when we have Pope Leo come out and say, war's not good. The predisposition of the church historically has been to be very slow to go to war, against war. There are streams in the church that are both pacifistic. Historically, my church tradition is part of that. So what's interesting is not that there's a conversation that's happening about war or not war, but that it became something that everyone talks about when the positions are pretty much known and have been known throughout history that popes don't like war in the same way your doctor doesn't like alcoholism, right? Like it's almost like you don't even have to ask what the doctor's opinion about this is, because obviously that's their opinion.
Which is so interesting, though, to me, because as you're saying, like, as we look at this from just a known fact, during President Trump's campaign, I know of friends that are Catholic that were very much singular issue voters on topics like abortion. Full stop.
Yeah.
And, autonomy of the family, decision making, when it comes to the government, I want to be able to make decisions on my family when it comes to vaccines, or very hot topics. And we see somebody like President Trump, who, there was a time when you and I were actually just talking about this. There was a time whenever we were looking at Mitt Romney. Mm-hmm. And America was questioning, is he truly a valid candidate as a president, given the fact that he's Mormon?
Right.
Or John Kerry, based on some of his policies and when it came to abortion and looking at that policy structure. Mm-hmm. And so when we look at American politics and religious identity, how has it evolved to where now we have President Trump posting AI pictures of himself as a doctor?
Yeah. Well, it's been very fraught actually all throughout history. So I think the big tell of history, most historians and most religious historians would look at something like the Founding Fathers. And there's religious language, Christian language used in those founding documents. But the reality is, when you peel back what they actually believed about their own faith and about Christianity in particular, they weren't Christian, many of them, not all, there are some exceptions. They weren't Christian the way that we might think of. Most of them were deists. Deism, to boil it down to something really rudimentary, and it's not necessarily fair to deism, is that there is a God who sort of started the clock and everything just kind of runs on its own. You have people like Thomas Jefferson, who has like the Jeffersonian Bible, where he just tears out the parts that he doesn't like, right? And so you would not in this day and age accept that as someone who is, quote unquote, a Christian. There was a big conversation around John F. Kennedy and whether or not he could be president because he was Catholic. So this isn't necessarily new, because the Christian religion is really vast and really broad. Evangelicalism, which is what most people think of nowadays when they talk about American Christians, isn't actually that old. It's only a little bit over 100 years old, started around Scopes monkey trial, and was actually a pushback to fundamentalism. But then it becomes its own thing. If you go back to, I'm a little bit younger than you. I mean, I'm a little bit older than you. You're a bit younger than me. If you go back to the late 60s and the early 70s, what's become evangelical Christians, abortion wasn't one of their issues. That was a quote unquote Catholic issue, like you said. And so it morphs over time. It changes over time, which means that theology and reasoning, philosophy around those things change over time. And what happened with the Pope and President Trump is what holds a position about war that in the theological world we would call Christian realism, which is that there are times where you just need to go to war. And so when someone asks him about it, he says, well, do you want Iran to have a nuclear weapon? Now, setting aside all of the reasons that might not or may be the reason to go to war, that's a Christian realist position. And that's not one that a Catholic like the Pope would hold as a philosophy on where to go to war. And so what you had is a collision of two historic Christian theologies about when and how people should go to war. But the language of such, just in our media landscape, is so broad and easy and grabbable. People talk a lot and don't know what they mean when they use certain words. So you have someone like the Speaker of the House, Mike Johnson, and others say, well, there's also this thing called just war theory. But no one in the room stops to say, okay, explain to me what just war theory is, because that's not actually a position that he holds. He holds a Christian realism position when it comes to war, and you can hear that in the language. And I'm not saying that's an illegitimate philosophy to have, but he doesn't even know that he has it. And neither does anyone else. He just knows that somewhere in the world there's a thing called just war, which probably means for most people a war is justified when I think it's justified.
And I have two streams of thoughts going on right now in my mind, and I want to go down this one in that as you're speaking, all I can visualize is right before going into war, or when I think we had just essentially sent missiles into Iran, there's this imagery of Christian leaders surrounding the president in the Oval Office praying for him. And so there's also that that stream of thought that says, well, we need to be praying for our president who's doing these, making these very difficult decisions, and that the Pope is wrong for weighing in or on this, in which then I have to ask, is this a policy disagreement, or is this truly just a personality clash that we are watching in real time?
Yeah. Well, and I would say it's neither.
Yeah.
I would say it's not a policy decision. The picture with President Trump surrounded by religious leaders, and of course, I think any Christian would have a very difficult time making the argument that you shouldn't pray for the president.
Yeah.
And matter of fact, maybe if you dislike the president's policies or his person or his character, that you should actually pray for them more. And this is one of the streams of Christian teaching, is that we pray for our enemies, and we pray for those who persecute us. So the theological disagreement is, and this gets kind of in the weeds, Celeste, and I know that some of your listeners will appreciate this and some will be incredibly bored by it, but there is a growing, and it's pretty new too, maybe about 20, 25 years of what we would call Christian dominionist. And Christian dominionist is the active theology of most of the people in the room who were praying for the president that basically says that America is God's tool to bring Christian dominion throughout the entire world. And so what they are enacting there is something that is not historical Christianity, historical Orthodox Christianity, but it's a new thing that borrows all of the language and gestures of Orthodox Christianity through the years and uses it toward a particular end that is mostly nationalistic. And so there are going to be conversations about this, and people like me, other theologians, writers, we have this discussion all the time.
Right.
And so when it bleeds over into the public, it seems startling oftentimes.
Yeah.
But there are plenty of women and men who have been writing and thinking about what they see happening and making both good and salient arguments and rebutting those arguments. That's one of the reasons that we do what we do, is we're trying to get to a better end for everybody. And that requires a certain amount of tension and pushback and back and forth. But that's hard to do on TikTok and Twitter.
Right. And I think that the question then becomes, for people that are not in any way, shape, or form religious or have been turned away from Christianity, simply sit there and say, how can Christians support this person, our president? And I'm very curious what your perspective would be if you think that that is actually the right question to be asking, or is it a misunderstanding of how religious identity is functioning in American politics today?
I understand that question. And the first step in answering it is to talk to Christians that you know.
Yeah.
And there are lots of ways people get there. Sometimes it is, there are two worlds. There's like the kingdom of this world and there's the kingdom of God, and we do the best we can with this world. So I'm going to go into the polling booth and I'm choosing what I believe to be the lesser of two evils based on my own assumptions or virtues or what I've been told. Like, we live in a media ecosystem right now where you can live your life well right now without hearing the best or the worst about any political candidate.
That's right.
All right. And so you don't actually know what all of the deficits or the virtues of a candidate are because of a political ecosystem in which you inhabit. But I also think a better question, the next step over there is, are we living in two different worlds when it comes to Christian and what is Christian? And we're probably living in multiple different worlds. There are people, and this has always been the case, who use religious language, religious gestures, symbolism, and they know that they are using them under false pretenses as a power move to get what they want. And then there are some people who do all of that and don't know that that's what they're doing. And there are people who push back on that. There are those of us who are just trying to do our best. given the full range of the Christian expression has been over the last 2,000 years, which is very layered and very textured, and everybody's busy and you can't read or know everything.
Right.
And like, oh, I never heard of that or thought about it this way.
Yeah.
And so you just sort of let the larger language and conversation wash over you and say, oh, I guess that's what it is. So start with your Christian neighbor, maybe, and ask questions, to continue to ask deeper and deeper questions, to be curious about what people actually believe and what makes us do what it is that we do. But fundamentally, and this is an interesting phenomena that we have right now in America, especially with the advent of Christian nationalism, which is probably about 30 years old, 40 years old, and it's just growing, and it's coupled in with dominionism, is that we have an active Christian community that is out of touch with what historical Orthodox Christianity is, and in its place have adopted and baptized the gestures of nation. So what becomes our religious practice is flags and songs and speeches, and that is actually the faith. Or some people think the culture wars have become the faith. Like, I am a Christian, so I am for this or I'm against that. And all of those things are actually a rejection of the faith and an idolizing of something else that is not the faith. And churches do it so people don't know that that's what their pastor or their denomination is doing. And it just takes a deeper exploration than what you're going to get on the nightly news.
Right. And I think that I'm curious, as I'm listening to you speak, Sean, then I have to ask myself, when we look at candidates and we hear Christian values often come up, you know, even in our local elections, our state elections, you hear that a lot. Christian values, you know, for family, God, and country. Can a nation, a state, be Christian?
Yeah, that's a great question. And this is the response that almost anyone doesn't like, especially from an Orthodox Christian view. So the Orthodox Christian view is what makes someone Christian is the indwelling of the Holy Spirit being operative in their life and in how they live and work in the world. So what that means by default is that things cannot be Christian. Music cannot be Christian. A piece of wood cannot be Christian. Only things that can be inhabited by the Holy Spirit can actually be Christian. So there's actually no such thing as a Christian nation. There can be nations full of Christians. A city or a state or a school board cannot be a Christian school board because only people can be Christian, because what it means to be Christian is to have an orientation to the world that is in line with the reality of who God is and God's coming kingdom. That's how we would define like a New Testament Christian. And so something out there in the world like, oh, I'm going to turn on some Christian music. Like, no, you have music that uses the language of Christianity. And people will be shocked to know that most of the people in Nashville writing Christian music don't claim to be Christians. They just know how to write music and they know how to use that language.
And make it sound like holy. I don't know.
It's not necessarily anything. You don't have to be a foodie to make great donuts necessarily. So once we dispel of that idea that something besides a person can be Christian, then we can have much more honest conversations about where we go as a country.
Yeah. And I'm curious, you know, you've talked a lot about how when we look at the disagreements that we're seeing between a president and a major religious leader like the Pope, that this isn't necessarily anything new. There's just a lot more visibility about it. And I'm curious from your perspective, though, with the introduction of the AI and the pictures, if there is something to you that seems different to all of this.
Well, I mean, what's the old saying? Like a lie can spread around the world before the truth gets its boots on. And we have a mechanism, we have technological mechanisms now that project and propel messages farther and faster than anyone in humanity has ever had that ability to do.
Right.
And when you have an ecosystem, both a personal ecosystem, just who we choose to be around, plus a media ecosystem, what we hear and what we choose to hear and what we choose to exclude, any message can go so far, so fast before anyone has the opportunity to check on the veracity of it. And so that's why we actually need to be formed into the kinds of people who are compelled to seek the truth and then to hold people accountable to that.
You can hear my entire conversation with public theologian Sean Palmer by heading to Houston Public Media's YouTube page. You can also read more of Sean's work by heading to SeanIsaacPalmer.com. Coming up, social media influencer Libby Ward gets honest about motherhood and what no one tells you and why she's sharing it in her new book. After this break.
Support comes from
Meet Gamola, songwriter, world-class violinist, and award-winning multi-genre artist. We just took his keys for the day and gave him a Ride Metro fare card. Visit ridemetro.org/Gamola to learn more about his ride.
Weekdays from 11 a.m. to 1 p.m., taking a deep dive into the stories that matter to Houstonians, keeping you informed, engaged, and entertained. With the generous support from our founding sponsor, Kathy Sanders.
Support for Houston Public Media comes from Novotny and Company, offering commercial and residential property tax protests for 39 years. The deadline to file a protest is May 15th. Info and online filing at novotnycompany.com. Support for Houston Public Media comes from listeners like you and from St. Arnold Brewing Company, a place for corporate events on tap, meeting rooms, AV equipment, and full catering available. More at starnold.com.
And now back to Hello Houston. To comment on today's topics, call or text 713-440-8870 or email us at talk@hellohouston.org. Now back to Ernie Manouse and Celeste Díaz Schurman.
Social media influencer Libby Ward has built a following by sharing the real side of motherhood through an honest, unfiltered, and yet very relatable lens. Now she's taking that message even further in her new book, Honest Motherhood, on losing my mind and finding myself. Here's my conversation with Libby about what inspired it and why these conversations matter. Joining me now is creator, author, and advocate for women, Libby Ward. Welcome to Hello Houston.
Thanks for having me.
So, Libby, I have been following you for a few years now, and I was, really excited to see that your work is now outside of social media, and it's a book. And I'm curious, what made you realize, or what made now the time to move your content from social media to becoming an author and having a book?
Yeah, I mean, I'm also excited that my work is outside of social media now as well. I mean, will always be forever grateful for getting my start on social media and to my community on there. But what ended up happening a few years in is I found myself saying the same thing over and over again and having different threads of conversation, some about the mental load, about the societal pressures on women and mothers, on being the default parent, and then also this other side where it was my own tendencies to be a people pleaser, to self-deny, to not speak my own needs, to not have boundaries. And in some ways, they seemed like separate conversations that really drew people to me, my own trauma and experiences, along with the external pressures of the world. And I have always seen those things as being interwoven, but that's a hard conversation to have online. And there's only so many characters in a caption. And so I've always been drawn to long form media and writing a book. And so I'm really excited to have my story in book form out there in the world, which really does touch on a lot of the things I speak about online, but really weaves the threads together around these different topics that make motherhood so hard and so overwhelming for so many mothers. And I hope that it's my story that helps people to reflect on their own motherhood rather than just, hey, this is hard, we're all in it together, which yes, it's important, but also here's how I found my way through despite the many difficulties that I faced.
And you really have built your brand around honesty. I mean, you're pretty vulnerable and you put yourself out there. As you mentioned, you talk about your childhood trauma. You talk about how that, relates to your motherhood today. And I'm curious, what's something in the book that might have been difficult, or you realized, okay, this is harder to put into words than I thought?
I would say one of the hardest things to put into words is the nuance of my relationship with my mother. Like so many of us, we love our mothers. We're grateful for what they did for us. And also at the same time, there's things they did or ways they acted or didn't act that had an impact on who we became and how we became that way, and our actions and reactions and the ways we parent and move through life in our adult life. And it was really hard to both explain to the reader what happened, in my childhood. I moved a lot. I moved 18 times, before I was 18 years old. We lived in poverty a lot. We accessed food banks and shelters, and, my mom, who I love, had undiagnosed and untreated mental health disorders. And so our home was chaos for a lot of my childhood life, which consistently impacts me in my adult life, and especially in motherhood with the overstimulation that comes and the ways they trigger our past wounds and all of that. And it was really hard to write down because it's not as simple and straightforward as the social media clips can make us think. It's not as simple and straightforward as a bad mom or a good mom, or all difficult memories or all good memories. It's really a nuanced relationship, both for myself and I know for a lot of other people and their mothers. And that was difficult to write about because I wanted to be able to tell the truth about how my childhood affected me and how I healed from that and learned how to parent from a place of wholeness and steadiness in my own self and who I was and what mattered to me, while also speaking to how that helped. How my childhood contributed to my motherhood, because I want to help other mothers to do the same and be able to hold space for two things being true at the same time. Maybe they did the best they could, and maybe it affected us in a negative way.
Right. And, that's interesting that you talk about that, because I am also very curious about when you were writing this book, who did you have in mind? Was that the new mom, a new mom coming into motherhood? Is it the overwhelmed mom? Was it something broader? Who is that person that you were thinking about?
I was thinking about any mom who is either overwhelmed and in the trenches of every day, drowning in the workload of motherhood, and also the women who aren't quite moms, and the mothers whose children have flown the nest. I have so many people who have come to me saying, wow, I've read this book and I am not in that stage anymore, but it helped to heal a part of me that I didn't know needed healing. And I cried tears that I've been holding in for 15 years because I name the things out loud that so many women struggle with but feel ashamed to say. And so while predominantly it's going to be, I think, mothers who are really in the thick of it that read the book, it really is meant for a mother at any stage of motherhood to name the things that are difficult and help us get an understanding and contextualize our experience so that it becomes less about self-blame and shame and more about just the truth and the reality of how hard motherhood actually is for so many of us.
Right. And I'm curious, what are some of the things that you name within this book that you think are resonating with so many people?
Yeah, so a big one is the mental load. Yeah. All of the things that we carry in our head that aren't written down, that you cannot see, the appointment that needs to be booked, the soccer cleats that need to be picked up, the birthday invitation that nobody knows has to be sent out, the questions that we need to ask and we need to remember to ask that no one ever really thinks about. I speak about being the default parent, being a mother and having things assumed to just be our role when really, my kids have two parents. And, even with my husband who carries a lot of those things now, the school is still calling me first, the doctors are still calling me first, things like that. So I speak to the gender norms that really put a lot of pressure on mothers in ways that they are not on fathers. And I also speak to our own tendencies to self-deny, put ourselves last on the list, feel guilty for taking care of ourselves, feel guilty for not being able to do everything at the same time. And I also speak to a really big piece is rage and resentment. And that's something that I don't think a lot of women want to say out loud, because we've been taught to believe that feeling anger or rage or resentment makes you a bad mom, or makes you ungrateful, or means you don't love your children. And I say the things out loud about rage and anger because it's a normal human emotion that happens when things are unfair or when things go wrong. And I try to normalize the fact that we have those human emotions, and also listen to what they're trying to tell us about our unmet needs. And so that's something I know resonates online, and I knew would also resonate in the book, because it is a emotion that comes with so much shame for a lot of women.
Right. And it's that burden of holding those silent pressures that you mentioned. It's like, okay, a husband might, my husband's very supportive as well, but it might be one of those things where, yes, he's going to cook dinner, but guess who's going to grocery shop? Guess who's going to decide what we're eating? And those things that as women we hold on to. And then oftentimes we don't even realize we're carrying them. And then we find ourselves burnt out. And I wanted to hear, what does support actually look like, and how you found support?
Support looks different for everybody. And that is something that took me a really long time to realize. I was trying to live my motherhood in relation to the mothers I knew online, in my friend groups, in my community. And it took me completely breaking down and seeking, help, whether it's through therapy, resources, books, to realize that I hadn't been honest about what my real actual motherhood looked like, that I had a husband who worked a lot of night shifts and was gone a lot, that I didn't have the village that I thought I was going to have. I was supporting my parents rather than them supporting me. I had a child with extra needs. I had my own trauma I was healing from. And it took me being honest about what my actual real life looked like, what my real capacity and priorities were, to be able to stop listening to the noise of what the world says I needed to do, and decide for myself what I needed in order to meet my needs and get the capacity I needed to parent my kids from a more present place. Like, the world is full of experts. It's full of information, right? We're in this mothering generation where we are just given research and information and expertise and standards and expectations at a velocity that no other mothering generation has had. And that used to really make me angry when people would be like, hey, you just need to take care of myself. And I'd be like, you have no idea what I'm carrying. How am I supposed to do that?
Yeah.
And when I finally admitted that my life looks different to the mothers around me, and that I had to give myself permission to let go of things, and give myself permission to let go of the shoulds, and to prioritize myself, and only I could really make those decisions, it helped me to let go of those standards and realize where I could reach out to for support. And I didn't write this book with any intention of telling mothers what to do, because I could say, oh, you should reach out to your parents for help. I have no idea if your parents are alive, if they're emotionally stable, if they're local. I don't know what your friendships look like, your pocketbook looks like, or none of the experts online or any of the influencers or any of the people that we look to for advice have that. I wrote this book because I had to figure out for myself where support was, what support actually looked like, and where I needed to make some changes for myself. And I hope that it helps moms to realize they can do that too, and that they know far more than they give themselves credit for.
Libby Ward is a creator, author, and advocate for women. Libby, thank you so much for joining me today on Hello Houston.
Thanks so much for having me.
And coming up, we're going to continue discussing today's top headlines. We're also going to discuss how Fort Bend County is taking a closer look at the air residents breathe. Stay with us for the second hour of Hello Houston.
Stay tuned. There's more Hello Houston on the way. For the latest in local news, subscribe to the Hello Houston daily newsletter at HoustonPublicMedia.org. Hello Houston is a production of Houston Public Media. The opinions expressed by the guests of this program are solely their own and do not represent the views of management, staff, or underwriters of Houston Public Media. This is News 88.7.
Houston Matters is your essential daily guide to the people, places, issues, and ideas that define Greater Houston.
Vulnerable households that have less of a means to recover from a flood, have less money to do it, are concentrated in the highest flood risk neighborhoods.
There's never going to be a perfect moment to come out or reveal something about yourself. There's never going to be a perfect moment to call somebody you haven't spoken to in years. Don't wait for all the stars to align.
I'm Craig Cohen. Join us for the next Houston Matters, weekday mornings at 9 here on News 88.7.
Support for Houston Public Media comes from Houston Parks Board, building an interconnected network of parks, trails, and green space for a more resilient and equitable city. Learn more at houstonparksboard.org.
30% chance for showers and thunderstorms this afternoon, high around 82 degrees. Chance for rain overnight tonight and a 100% chance for rain tomorrow. Heavy rainfall is expected on Friday with the high right around 66. Currently 81 degrees at the University of Houston, and this is your NPR station, KUHF Houston News 88.7, a service of the University of Houston. It's now 12 noon. More of Hello Houston straight ahead.
Just ahead on this hour of Hello Houston, Houston ISD has announced 7 more elementary and middle schools for its Future 2 pilot program, which will focus on building skills related to artificial intelligence. We'll discuss this and more of the top headlines of the day. I'm Celeste Díaz Schurman.
And I'm Ernie Manouse. We'll also talk to Houston Public Media's reporter Melissa Inahe about Fort Bend County's efforts to track air pollution.
Plus, it's Thursday, which means it's time for us to share our latest current obsessions, and we'll share yours too.
That's right. Give us a call or text us at 713-440-8870 or email us at talk@hellohouston.org with comments, questions, or current obsessions. You can also watch us live on YouTube by going to houstonpublicmedia.org.
Hello Houston continues right after the news from NPR and News 88.7.
Hello Houston is made possible in part by founding sponsors John Bradshaw and Kathy Sanders, by Metro, and by gifts from listeners like you.
Live from NPR News, I'm Lakshmi Singh. Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth is facing another day explaining why he believes the U.S. is winning the war with Iran. A day after House lawmakers question him, members of the U.S. Senate have their first opportunity now to praise him or, like Democratic Senator Kirsten Gillibrand, criticize the decision to go to war at all.
This is a defined mission set that we have had great success in pursuing against a determined enemy who seeks nuclear weapons. And I'm proud of the opportunity to remind the American people, because they believe in it as well, that they can't have it.
You don't care whether
the American people the American people are quite smart. They understand and see through spin. They know that a regime that says death to America, that seeks nuclear weapons and the ability to deliver.
The Trump administration is seeking a $1.5 trillion military budget for 2027. Early morning trading saw global oil prices spike as high as $126 a barrel over fears of an escalation in the U.S.-Iran standoff in the Strait of Hormuz. In the U.S., AAA finds the average cost for a gallon of regular gasoline has risen to $4.30. NPR Stephen Basaha has reaction from customers.
The cost to fill up her Silverado in Birmingham, Alabama makes Mary Kaiser numb.
I don't feel anything at all. I'm just disappointed.
Chris Covey's visiting family and says gas has not affected his driving yet.
The place where I'm starting to notice it is the price of groceries, because a lot of things are trucked into where I live in Arizona.
Gas prices started dropping about 2 weeks ago with hopes the Strait of Hormuz would reopen. But Aixa Díaz with AAA says with no clear end to the war in sight, prices are climbing back up.
It's so volatile, and it really just depends on what's happening geopolitically, and that can change by the day.
Overall, gas prices are up about 44% since the war began more than 2 months ago. Stephen Basaha, NPR News.
A peace summit in Tel Aviv today brought together more than 80 peace-building and shared society organizations fighting to change the trajectory of Israel's future. NPR's Eleanor Beardsley has more.
Charlie Hoste represents an Israeli language school offering a different way of teaching.
We think it's important to teach people language through the reality that's happening here, so people are able to, use Arabic and use Hebrew as a tool to make a positive change, to talk about injustice and things that you don't typically learn the language for in a standard language school.
Hoste says there's very little tolerance in Israeli society today for talk of peace between Jews and Arabs, or for even something as basic as being a language school that offers Hebrew and Arabic together. Eleanor Beardsley, NPR News, Tel Aviv.
This is NPR News.
Live from News 88.7 in Houston, I'm Gail DeLauder. They're cleaning up after an asphalt tank ruptured in South Houston Wednesday, leaving a man dead. Let's go live to News 88.7's Tom Perumian, who's at Martin Asphalt. And Tom, what's happening out there?
Gail, I'm at the intersection of North Texas and 1st Street, right behind Martin Asphalt. The first impression is the stench of tar against the idling of fire trucks. A huge swath of roadway near the rear of the Martin Asphalt plant is covered in that tar, and a small runoff channel right next to the plant is being pumped out, and it had been full of tar, just a long black line showing how high that tar was in that channel. It runs for at least an eighth of a mile. Behind the fence, the ruptured tank standing broken, pipes bent, and scaffolding down. The cleanup here is ongoing, and nobody seems to want to talk to the media. I'm Tom Perumian, News 88.7.
Large amounts of seaweed washing up on Galveston beaches is causing an unpleasant smell. Extreme weather expert Hal Needham says the increase in seaweed is nothing out of the ordinary.
They've had a smell of it, but it is also natural and it does help build the beach. And it's just something, it's very dynamic. It can kind of come and go. So definitely it's something we're going to keep a close eye on, but we're still hoping for a great season all along the Texas coast.
The Galveston Park Board says seaweed buildup has to reach a certain height and depth before they can move it. The Astros have a doubleheader against the Orioles after last night's rain delay in Baltimore. No score at the top of the third. A 40% chance of rain today. Today's high expected around 82 degrees. For tonight, chance of rain goes up to 60%. Overnight low near 66, and we have a 100% chance of rain tomorrow. Temperatures falling into the low 60s. I'm Gail DeLauder, News 88.7.
Support for NPR comes from NPR stations. Other contributors include Progressive Insurance, home of the Name Your Price tool, so drivers can see coverage options at Progressive.com or 1-800-PROGRESSIVE. Price and coverage match limited by state law. And the listeners who support this NPR station.
Live from Houston Public Media and News 88.7, it's Hello Houston, an open forum on today's biggest stories affecting Houston and beyond. Call now, 713-440-8870, or let us know your thoughts on today's topics by emailing us at talk@hellohouston.org. And now your hosts for Hello Houston, Ernie Manouse and Celeste Díaz Schurman.
That sure seems like it's the two of us.
Yes.
That's
Hello,
welcome Houston.
Back. Sorry, Ernie, I'm not talking.
No, I just kind of rambled right into it. It just struck me funny. What is today's date?
Today is April 30th, 2026, the last day of April.
Yes.
And tomorrow is May 1st.
Now, see, we know some things. Celeste knows that next day is May 1st. Okay. We sit here so sure of ourselves so much of the time, giving you our genius, brilliant thoughts. But it takes Sean on YouTube to point out something we never even noticed. And we're both coming clean on this. And an apology out to Resin8 for a year or however long Resin8 has been commenting. We always stumble over the name. Resin said, Resin8 We never got it. We'll admit it.
We never got it.
So thank you, Sean, for pointing it out. And Resin8, thank you for being there and still sharing with us, even though we slaughtered your name time and time again. I'm seeing in the chat that it was his music production label, and he turned it into a screen name. So it was Resin8. Cool. Yeah.
Well, people always ask me, what are you guys talking about during break? Oftentimes we're going through, we're looking at either text we've received or we're going back and looking at maybe in the first hour we had YouTube comments that we didn't get to. And this time we were laughing at ourselves for not knowing Resin 8.
Moving on from that faux pas of ours, we did get a text that said, to one of the hosts, I'm assuming they mean you, Celeste,
Yes.
because it continues on to say, lived in Bakersfield, late 70s, only 2 or 3 hours from the Pacific Ocean beaches and the Sequoia National Park. Enjoy the adventure.
Oh, thank you. Thank you to whoever sent that in. That is really, really kind. I'm definitely looking at this as an adventure.
You know, it's funny to me, when growing up on the East Coast, we never referred to the distance of something by miles. It was always the amount of time.
Yeah.
So it's 3.5 hours to New York, 7 hours to Cape Cod. You can see where we went. But now those times are shorter. So it's like 6 hours to Cape Cod, 2.5 hours to New York because the roads got better and all that. So you may not be 2 or 3 hours from the Pacific Ocean now because that was the late 70s.
Yeah, it's very interesting. When I was out there and people would say, we don't have all the big shiny things because it is a smaller town and very agriculture and energy focused, or oil and gas. They would say, but we're really close to all of the big shiny things. So I'm excited about that because here you drive an hour and you're in the woodlands.
Did you tell them the big shiny thing is coming? You.
Oh, no,
There
not
you go.
quite.
You're going to brighten it up out there.
Oh, thanks.
Anyway, we've got a lot on today's show. We're going to be talking about air quality over in Fort Bend County. They've got an effort to try and get a handle on it, understand it better, and then understanding brings solutions. Also, it is Thursday, so a regular feature of our Thursday is what is your current obsession? What are you obsessed with? We'll tell you what we're obsessed with, and you can probably figure out what I'm obsessed with lately, but the question is, what are you obsessed with? So email them, text them, send them to us. The email is talk@hellohouston.org. The phone number, 281, no, it's not. I was going to give my home phone number.
Phone number, 713-440-8870.
Text or call. Yeah, I'm not going to give my cell phone number. I mean,
I'll
I
give
like
it
you,
out.
but I don't necessarily need to know your current obsession.
Email me. I'll give you Ernie's phone number.
And she means it. Anyway, all that's still to come in the show, but the world continues to revolve outside of us, and good things and bad. Celeste has got the headlines. Oh, no, I'm going to do the first headline today.
I was waiting for you to jump in.
Yes, we reported yesterday, that's why I'm doing it, is that the U.S. Supreme Court has struck down Louisiana's congressional map in a major ruling on voting rights. In a 6-3 decision, the court said that the state's map, which created a second majority black district, was an unconstitutional racial gerrymander. The justices ruled that the Voting Rights Act did not require Louisiana to draw that district, limiting how race can be used in redistricting going forward. The decision leaves the broader law in place, but critics say it significantly weakens protections for minority voters. Louisiana must now redraw its map, likely reducing the number of majority black districts, with potential ripples across into other states. Joining us right now to talk about this is a familiar voice to HPM listeners. Jen Rice now reports with Democracy Docket. And if you'd like to join the conversation or chime in, 713-440-8870. Hello, Jen.
Hey, Ernie, how are you doing?
I am doing well. I mentioned this to you in a text back and forth exchange that we had, that now you're fighting the good fight out there, keeping people abreast and informed of what's happening with voting rights in our country. And the biggest ripple recently is what just happened yesterday. To help place it in time for our listeners, if you could share a brief summation, maybe more clear than what I said.
Yeah, so yesterday was a huge ruling from the U.S. Supreme Court, and at Democracy Docket, we've been waiting for months for this ruling to come out. We're just like, do you think it's this week? Do you think it's this week? Like, it's just something we've been waiting for around the clock. And that ruling finally came out yesterday, and the big takeaway from it is that they've gutted Section 2 of the Voting Rights Act. And this is a huge landmark historic decision, and it effectively ends some protections that minority voters have had for decades in the United States.
One thing that I keep seeing mentioned about this is that they didn't throw out Section 2, but they kind of took the teeth out of it. Why do you think that was the way they went?
Yeah. I think some critics would say that, they're doing one thing under the guise of something else. They've really gutted it, but they're trying to make it seem like they are just modifying it, kind of making changes at the margins. But this is actually a colossal change, and it really is going to make it almost impossible for people to prove racial discrimination in court now.
So, Section 2, for our listeners to understand exactly what did that provide, what did that say, and then how has it been changed?
Mm-hmm. So, to give an example, this is not theoretical, particularly in Houston and definitely not in Texas, where they just had redistricting last year, and a panel of judges in Texas last year actually said that a map they blocked the map and said that it was likely an unconstitutional racial gerrymander. So this is not theoretical in Houston and in Texas. This just happened, and just a couple months ago. And basically now, moving forward, when there are new maps that come out, you're going to have the same situation where you're going to have voting rights advocates, minority voters saying this map on its face looks to be a racial gerrymander. We're taking it to court. And what they're going to find is that it's now much harder to prove. Before, they needed to say, look, this map you can see that the effects are racially discriminatory. And now, after this new ruling, they're going to have to prove intent. They're going to have to prove these map makers intentionally discriminated against minority voters, and that is much harder to prove. It's very difficult to find evidence of intentional racial discrimination versus a court getting to analyze the map and say, oh, it used to be like this, now the effect is this. We can see that the effect here is racially discriminatory.
So no longer does the outcome matter, it's the intent initially. And if you say, we went about this trying to find the fairest way we could do this redistricting, okay, this is just how the pieces fell.
Yes, exactly. And it also, it basically enshrines the idea that partisan gerrymandering, not racial, but partisan, where, a party is redrawing the map for their own benefit. It basically enshrines the idea that that's normal, that's okay, and that's like a legitimate objective. And if you want to challenge a map, you have to make sure that it still meets the partisan goals of the map drawer.
Explain a little of that. I know this isn't what we agreed to talk about, so if you can, please help me with it. Why do they feel it is all right to gerrymander along political affiliations, and yet it's not to do it to preserve community voice in groupings of like people?
Yeah, no, that's a huge question. It's a very good question. And it's something that's, this is sort of the historical moment we're living in right now, is where we're grappling with that exact question. But I guess I would say the key thing to know about partisan gerrymandering is that it was not always okay. And federal courts did not always acknowledge it as, not something for them to intervene with. There was a court decision in 2018, a U.S. Supreme Court ruling that basically said it's no longer our job for federal courts to intervene if there's partisan gerrymandering. But there are some states in the country that have their own state level bans on partisan gerrymandering, including Florida, which is funny because they just passed a partisan gerrymander yesterday, despite it being illegal in their state. Yeah, it's a fascinating moment that we are living in right now, where these things that had been settled, partisan gerrymandering bad, racial gerrymandering bad, these are things that we just assume. Everything's getting rewritten right now as we speak, and people are still trying to understand what yesterday's ruling means and how people move forward from here. It's a truly remarkable time.
We're speaking with Democracy Docket reporter Jen Rice. You can join the conversation at 713-440-8870. We do have a call from Jane from Fort Bend. Jane, welcome to Hello Houston. What is your comment or question for Jen?
Hi, Jen. I'm wondering all of us are so exhausted with gerrymandering, basically people in power. And I apologize if you've already answered this. I'm just jumping on. What do you think about a federal legislation that all districts are done by a nonpartisan party. And that's at the federal, state, and local level. Just across the board, the districts are drawn, and we're done with this.
Thank you very
Jane.
much, Jane. Yes, Jen?
Yeah, Jane, I think you went straight to the heart of the matter. You kind of just saw through all of it, all of the complicated stuff, and you went straight for the main point, which is that that is kind of the solution that a lot of people point to, is that if you have Congress pass a federal ban on gerrymandering, that's, how we work around this. And over the past year, we've seen sort of a race in between Republican-led states and Democrat-led states as they've been trying to sort of nullify each other's redistricting gains. And, like we just had in Virginia last week, they just passed a new map. So Democrats had put the plan to voters, which I think is a really key distinction for a lot of people, particularly in Texas, where the maps in Texas last year were drawn and passed without any voter approval. But last week in Virginia, it went to the voters approved, and they said, yes, we want to do this plan. And, to a lot of outrage from Republicans in Virginia and around the country. And I think exactly what you're saying, Jane, is probably the big picture solution, that that's the answer, is to have a federal ban, like you're saying.
Jen, if I'm not mistaken, though, California had a nonpartisan districting board, however you want to put that. But then they took a vote once again to the people to say, can we step over that for this particular cycle and put in a new map? And the voters approved that. So even when you have a nonpartisan voting board, political influences do come into play.
Absolutely. Yeah. It's all sort of on a spectrum, but I've been thinking about redistricting all day, every day for a year now. Yeah. And I do genuinely believe that, all the cynicism of politics aside, that all of these systems can be better. It's not impossible for these systems to work and be good faith. I truly believe that this is not just something that's like a problem that can never be fixed. I genuinely believe that there are solutions that this stuff can improve.
If the voters approve the redoing of maps, does that give it a stronger footing moving forward in through the court system, as opposed to the way Texas did it, even though we saw Texas's maps were upheld? But that second component you made reference to a little bit earlier about how important it is that the voters have a say in this.
Yes, absolutely. That's something also, just an interesting plot that we've been watching come out over the past year, is just what you're saying. And I do think right now in Virginia, where they just voted, we had the Virginia Supreme Court heard oral arguments this week. There's multiple lawsuits challenging the plan in Virginia. And that was a lot of the argument that they made was, look, we went to the voters have approved this. And basically the defendants kind of representing Virginia were saying, please don't throw out an election, that we just held a valid election where the people of Virginia approved this plan. So yes, I think we're going to find out very soon if courts are going to assign extra weight, to the fact that voters did weigh in on the plan.
If we're keeping a tally score at this point from the redistricting that seemed to have started with us here in Texas and then has spread across the country, who is winning seat-wise at this point? Do we know?
Yeah, at the moment, it's pretty even. I believe Republicans are up by 11 potential seats and Democrats, I think, are up by 10. But all of this is very fluid for two reasons. One, some of these are still being litigated. And also, like in Virginia, and then also it's really going to come down to what voters want at the end of the day. Yes, parties can draw lines a certain way, but it's a funny word in the redistricting world. A dummy-mander is when you go too far with redistricting and it kind of backfires on a party. And there has been a lot of conversation about whether the map that Texas drew and the map that Florida has just drawn, whether those are dummy-manders, where they're trying to stretch they could be stretching their voters too thin, and then actually ending up with districts that make it easier for the opposite party to win. So that's something that could still happen. So just because they say Texas is picking up 5 more GOP seats, it remains to be seen. And it is ultimately up to the voters in November.
The will of the voters in each of those. A lot of folks were saying that because of the timing on all of this, it's not going to impact these upcoming elections. But if I'm reading this correctly, Louisiana has just delayed the elections to gerrymander, to fix their seats now that this ruling came down, and that it could have impact right away. Now, for Texas, we're already set on our maps that got gerrymandered, and we've been told we can use them through 2030 at this point. Do we see this continuing across? Are we going to see other places reconfiguring? Do they have enough time before the November elections?
That's really in our newsroom. That's what we're looking at today. We're trying to figure out where is some potential wiggle room. I think what happened in Louisiana just now is shocking. The absentee ballots have already gone out, and then they're trying to delay their election. That's just literally inconceivable. But I also do want to note, though, in terms of continuing consequences and how far this could play out, that there's so much conversation about what this means for Congress and for federal elections. You don't hear as many people saying this is going to affect, this Calais ruling that the Supreme Court just issued is going to affect every level of government. It's going to affect your state house seats. It's going to affect your state senate. It could affect city council seats. This is something that's going to change how all maps are drawn, not just at the federal level.
I know we're out of time here, but really quickly, just tell people, what is Democracy Docket? What do you folks do? Who are you, for people that aren't familiar?
Thank you. I appreciate that opportunity. Yeah, so I am a Houston Public Media alum, and now I'm at Democracy Docket, which was founded by Mark Elias. He is an election attorney, and his law firm is constantly working on protecting voting rights across the country. Just so many active lawsuits. And then he started a media organization called Democracy Docket to make sure that there was news coverage about all the work that they were doing, and to just make sure that information was getting out to people. And so that's what I do. And I'm just worrying about redistricting all the time for you.
So, Jen, then I have to ask you, so now that we have this ruling come down, what are you looking at next and moving forward? What should people be watching out for?
Well, right now I'm waiting on the Virginia Supreme Court ruling to see if the map that they just passed in Virginia is going to stand or not. I'm watching to see in Florida if the governor is going to sign the map that just passed, and then there will probably be litigation immediately challenging it. And then we're looking at states like Louisiana, are they going to suddenly change their maps, it seems like, even for this cycle, which is already underway. And then I'm also paying attention to, across the country, how this opinion will reflect in state and local elections as well.
Jen, come back and visit us whenever. It's fascinating. We need to stay on top of it. And as I always say, if you are not registered to vote, you are making the biggest error in your world, because this is how you have a say. And then get out there and vote.
Thank you. Jen Rice, reporter from Democracy Docket. Thanks, Jen, for joining us.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks so much.
And coming up on Hello Houston, we're going to talk with Fort Bend County reporter for Houston Public Media, Melissa Inake, about Fort Bend County's efforts to track air pollution. This is News 88.7. Stay with us.
We're in.
We know you value Houston Public Media. That's why you're watching right now. So take the next step and become a new member of the station you rely on. Every gift makes a difference. And what matters most right now is supporting the station that brings you the news and information you rely on. It only takes a minute to make a big difference. So join as a new member today at houstonpublicmedia.org/donate or call 800-364-8300.
Using fewer words every day, 28% less than 15 years ago, says a new study.
We no longer go talk to a barista when we order coffee. We use an app for that. We shop online as opposed to going to a store.
What's lost when we talk less? Use your words, people. Next time, Here and Now.
Here and Now begins at 1 p.m. on News 88.7.
Picture a placid river out maybe in Colorado somewhere, fly fishing galore. Now picture inflation.
The retail side of the business this year has been very slow. We've seen a definite drop year over year.
I'm Kai Rizdal, the fly fishing microeconomy, next time on Marketplace.
That's today at 6:30.
Support for Houston Public Media comes from Visit Galveston, presenting Art Walk. Various art is featured in downtown galleries and artist studios. Open to the public on the second Saturday of each month. More at visitgalveston.com.
Support for Houston Public Media comes from listeners like you and from CertaPro Painters, offering residential and commercial painting services, from color consultations to full project management. Estimates and more at CertaPro.com.
And now back to Hello Houston. To comment on today's topics, call or text 713-440-8870 or email us at talk@hellohouston.org. Now back to Ernie Manouse and Celeste Díaz Schurman.
A new initiative in Fort Bend County is taking a closer look at the air residents breathe. For the first time, officials are using a mobile lab to travel through neighborhoods and track more than 1,000 different air pollutants in real time. The goal is to identify potential health risks and pollution hotspots across the area. And joining us now to explain what this initiative could mean for residents is Melissa Inaje, the Fort Bend County reporter for Houston Public Media. Melissa, welcome to Hello Houston.
Hello, thank you. I'm excited to be here.
If you have questions, comments, want to join the conversation, 713-440-8870. Let's just start pretty much in the very beginning of it all. What exactly is this new Fort Bend County initiative? But more importantly, why now?
Yeah, great questions. I mean, this initiative, I guess you could say, is the product of many community members, environmental group, advocacy groups, lobbying with their local Fort Bend County government officials and trying to get more eyes on the issue on caring about the air quality in Fort Bend County. And, like any kind of initiative that requires funding, resources, support, this took some time. And finally, with the approval of Fort Bend County commissioners, the Fort Bend County Health and Human Services are undertaking this with their approval to go around in this, data-driven, literally driven mobile lab. And it's just it's collecting thousands of pollutants in there, and they're doing it not stationary. It's always mobiles, which is different this time.
So, and really quickly though, is Fort Bend worse off, any different than any other county, and that's why it's important that it's there? Or is it just it is a county that pulled it together?
Oh, another great question, Ernie. Mm-hmm. I mean, let me give you this example. The annual American Lung Association, they released a report recently, and they had Houston ranked as the 6th worst in the nation. And I'm like, okay, what's going on with Fort Bend County? There was no data at all for Fort Bend County, and that means that it was non-existent. The website stated that because there's just not a air quality monitoring network that has data available. And that was just staggering because Harris County's right there. They took information data from Montgomery County, our neighboring counties, Brazoria County. They all received Fs in their ozone. And that's just, we're not a bubble. We're next to them. So the time was, why not yesterday?
Right. And then I immediately think then, so if we're zooming into Fort Bend County, were there any areas that were specifically hotspots or areas that were definitely of higher concern?
Yeah, now this is the partnership with University of Texas Austin, University of Texas Health Houston. They are looking at the neighborhood level, so they are going at a variety of areas, not only the neighborhoods, the rural areas, the schools, the churches. They're going up and down Fort Bend County from actually even to the coal plant in outside of the city of Thompson. I was there recently for a story, small town, and next to them is the NRG plant. It's a coal-powered plant that is on the map. They have been tracking everywhere from Needville to Richmond to Rosenberg to Sugarland. They're good. They want to go. They don't want to miss anything in its track for areas.
Okay, the obvious question: what do these mobile units look like?
Yeah, they had Fort Bend County had an open house this month, and it was public, and residents came. They got to meet the lead investigators, the scientists basically working behind this lab, and. Think of your Amazon truck. I don't want to put a brand out there, but think of your delivery truck, and you open the door, and it's like wires. It's almost like an HVAC machine where you're seeing just vacuums and wires and a computer and screens, and it's like, okay, this is definitely a laboratory on wheels. It just looks like it's inside of a computer.
So it's not like a souped up ice cream machine. Like I think like a soft ice cream truck that comes around and like
Exactly. It's even a little bit more, mysterious than that. But you can see at the top the kind of it doesn't look like it's a self-driving vehicle or anything like that.
So why a vehicle and not a brick and mortar?
Yeah, well, it's important for them the scientists have told me that it's important for them to get data from that can count the way the wind moves, because that has to do with pollution, whether it's downstream or upstream. Stationary isn't just exactly the best picture of how air pollution or air molecules or air chemicals move in any given situation. You stand in Houston in one place and you smell something one second, you smell something a different second. And that was just really interesting because they said, the scientists again on this said that sometimes what our nose, it fails us. What it smells fails us. We think, oh, that stinks, it must be bad or it's not good for us. But sometimes the more odorless, subjects are what are killers.
Does the mobile unit put out pollutants?
Oh, is it an electric vehicle?
Well, I don't know.
Right?
You tell me.
I did. That was one thing I didn't, I have to double check with my sources. I didn't see anything EV in there.
It drives around into your neighborhood putting out pollutants as it goes to find out what the pollutants are.
It's like an ice cream truck, Ernie.
Yeah, my ice cream truck.
Soft serve.
Yeah. No ice cream, just chemicals and pollutants.
We did have a question on YouTube. Dark One Joy says, does Fort Bend have major polluters, something as bad as refinery, for example?
Yeah. And again, that great question. That goes back to the coal power plant. That's been getting a lot of pushback from the community. They've worked with Airlines Houston, both parties, to just try to get to a more accountability for the amount of smog or different kind of volatile compounds that do come from combustion in those plants. That's one thing I could think of the equation. And combustion in air and these coals, I've spoke to firefighters in the city of Thompson, and they said they put out, the combustion from the plant very regularly. And I also saw new neighborhoods being built, not too far. It was just, what's coming over your ear. And then, that was something to think about. But there's also something with that community has been gathering to a lot more advocacy for is concrete batch plants. Fort Bend County, just like the rest of the state of Texas, there's development. It's growing rapidly. They're expecting, at least 1 million people in the next, that's what the census is saying, in the next couple years in Fort Bend County. Those are homes being built. And, what needs to be put into those foundations? Concrete.
Right.
But some of those businesses were there before these developments started happening. And you can see the concrete batch plant in Jewel Pit. That actually, with community advocacy, they did not renew their permit for the third time, excuse me. So they, it's just this back and forth with community being concerned, saying, I moved here, I didn't know that I'd be living next to a batch plant, or something of that. I'm just want to have a new home for my family, and this is concerning to me as a resident.
Melissa, one of the goals of this is to identify potential health risks. And what do those health risks look for the residents of Fort Bend County?
Yeah, I mean, depending on what they find with the air quality, there's 6 particular pollutants that they're looking for in the air. The ozone, components of smog. We see a lot of PM 2.5, which is fine particulate matter. That is something that the EPA actually monitors as well, with the industrial industry, emissions from heavy traffic, or, the odorless silent killer of, combustion. And so these all can affect, just like from the doctor you heard from Baylor yesterday, it's the things that can affect premature births, asthma, anything to do with the lungs, long term, just children with asthma or sensitivity. Nowadays with data, you can look on if you have a smartphone, they tell you the air quality. What about Fort Bend County? They can tell you what's in with this information. Hopefully they'll be able to tell you what's in the air at what time, and if you have a sensitivity, maybe you shouldn't be outside.
Let me ask this: how does this initiative intersect like larger conservation and environmental justice things?
I think it's this intersection of the community of environmentalists who are concerned of just overall the health of Fort Bend County, whether it's the air, whether it's the public health. I think it's a partnership. That's the only reason why we're here, at the fact that they have their first air quality study, I think it's just going to be a continued initiative where environmentalists, community members, they've told me that community members have gathered as a group in Fort Bend County and started Facebook groups, and they're meeting and they're gathering. I think it's just an initiative on multiple fronts. That's how we got here.
And I guess the other side of this is, okay, we gather this data. What do we do with it? Because I see the data coming out. People are like, oh my God, look how bad our air is. But if there's not the incentive to change that, what do we do with this information as individuals?
Yeah. I mean, we have to start somewhere, right? And this is exactly what they want to know. When I spoke to residents from Richmond, they say, I'm looking for a house and we take care of ourselves and our health, and we work out and we eat healthy. Why shouldn't we care about the air we breathe? And this is why we're starting here. County officials are telling me that they are going to use this data, work with science, work with the scientists, and work on a public health policy that not only considers these things, but can put policies in place, as well as they want to have, full-time air quality monitors with the TCEQ here.
So besides the air, there's a lot more in Fort Bend, and you cover all of it. What are you looking at now?
Besides air quality, we'll get those results in the middle this summer, actually. Okay. They're going to have the full report by the end of the year, and we'll know more about that. But I'm also tracking, there's a situation with Fort Bend ISD where I'm following a story on some parents who are pretty upset with what's been happening to their special needs children in the classroom. There's been multiple employee firings after it's been discovered in an investigation. It's a criminal investigation at the moment that their children were harmed under supervision of these teachers. And Fort Bend ISD said in a statement, all these employees who are associated with this particular classroom are no longer employed. So it's an ongoing story.
Lastly, before we let you go, the significance of us having a Fort Bend County seat, besides you having a job, but why it's important for us as a community and as a station to have this voice.
I think because everyone deserves a seat at the table. I think Fort Bend County, when I've met these residents, when I've met, these people who support Houston Public Media and beyond, everyone deserves a seat at the table. Everyone deserves someone to be at their commissioner's court, at their city council meetings, because the media landscape is changing. You know this out of everyone, Ernie, that, we need reporters, we need, feet on the ground, boots on the ground to be there for this community.
Melissa Anahe is the Fort Bend County reporter for Houston Public Media. You can head to houstonpublicmedia.org and find more of Melissa's coverage. And Melissa, thank you for joining us today on Hello Houston.
Thanks for having me.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Coming up, our current obsessions, and yours have already started to come in. Keep sending those to us. Stay with us as Hello Houston continues.
Houston Matters wants...
It's not just your car. It's the one that brought your kids home from school, took you cross-country, held memories, laughter, even a few breakdowns. When it's time to let go, give your car a new purpose. Donate it and turn memories into meaningful support for this station. Plus, you'll enjoy free and easy pickup, potential tax benefits, and a simple donation process. Your gift supports the programs you and your family love. Donate today and help keep public media strong. Call or donate online.
Lamb, host of The Splendid Table. This week, it's a live event from the beautiful Pacific Northwest. We're on stage in Seattle with native food experts, standard bearers for the city's incredible Vietnamese and Filipino food, chefs, and bakers. It's coming up on The Splendid Table.
You can hear The Splendid Table Sunday afternoon at noon on News 88.7.
Find your way around the neighborhoods of Rome by sampling their favorite street foods.
Rome is truly one of the best places in Europe for a food tour.
Get into the rhythm of everyday life in Portugal.
We are such laid-back, relaxed people.
And learn the nicknames to the skyscrapers of London.
We've got the Gherkin.
It's all on the next Travel with Rick Steves.
Saturday morning at 6 on News 88.7. Support for Houston Public Media comes from Texas Mutual Insurance Company, a workers' compensation provider committed to helping Texas communities and emphasizing safety. More at texasmutual.com/TexansGetIt.
Support for Houston Public Media comes from listeners like you and from Baylor College of Medicine. Baylor's work centers on advancing health and medicine through research, education, and patient care.
And now back to Hello Houston. To comment on today's topics, call or text 713-440-8870 or email us at talk@hellohouston.org. Now back to Ernie Manouse and Celeste Díaz Schurman.
And it's that time.
What time?
Is Thursday.
Yeah.
And it's time for our current obsessions. Woo. This is a rundown of the things that are currently taking up all of our time. It might be that audiobook that you drive an extra mile for. It could be just what you're scrolling, what your algorithm keeps popping up, or the video or the movie that you are binging or the series. And before we jump into our obsessions, one of the top trending items right now on X is the teaser trailer for the new Resident Evil film. And that is based on the popular video game series. And that's directed by Zach Kreger, who directed Weapons.
Mm-hmm.
So,
it's funny. You can always tell who writes this script for us, and it's always Garrett, one of our producers, because he loves films. So he's always looking at whenever it says, what are people obsessed with? He always looks for what films people are obsessed with, because he loves films too. So shout out to Garrett for always pulling this together for us.
That's right. And before we get into ours, you are welcome, of course, to share your current obsessions. And we've had quite a few texts come through. And so you can call or text 713-440-8870.
Before we get into ours, we did get a text that says, current obsession. I think this is interesting. When ABC tried to cancel Jimmy Kimmel, the first time we canceled our subscription to Hulu and Disney Plus.
Yep.
And for the first time supported Houston Public Media. At $5 a month, you get access to PBS Passport. I quickly binged all seasons of All Creatures Great and Small, Poldark, and began watching Call the Midwife. I got to watch the entire series of The Count of Monte Cristo and the first season of The Forsytes, and now I'm on the final seasons of The Durrells of Corfu. Masterpiece collection of shows is just so good because all based on time-honored literature with great writing, directing, actor, and high production values. Thank you. I don't know who sent this because it only says text, but yes, if you become a member at $5 or more monthly, you have access to Passport, which has an amazing library of things. So if you're not already obsessed with us, do that and get obsessed with some of the series you've grown up hearing about or are currently on.
That's right. And we also got another text that says, obsessed, the Michael Jackson movie. I am obsessed with listening to the live concert versions of his songs, not knowing more of his story. A must see. So
I want to say, when you start digging in to learn more, you may be surprised what you
feeling that is a
find.
Younger person.
Yeah, you may not want to dig into it.
We did also get a call that says current obsession, The Testaments on Hulu. It's based on the novel by Margaret Atwood.
Yes.
Not as good as the book, but I'm sticking it out before making my final judgment. Allison from Jersey Village. Allison, thanks for sending yours in.
Yes, The Handmaid's Tale is another Margaret Atwood. I had the opportunity to host her for Performing Arts Houston. I did the live stage interview with her. And it's just so funny because she reads as a gentle senior woman. She had her little purse and she gave me the advice. She said to me, Ernie. I'm like, oh, Margaret Atwood's going to give me some advice, yes? Don't leave your wallet out in the dressing rooms. I bring my purse with me. And I thought, oh, that's so sweet. And yet here she is writing these futuristic thrill stories of Handmaid's Tale. And it's just funny.
I love that. Never judge a book by its cover.
Oh, very good. Very good. Very true, too.
Yes. We also had another text from Christian from Katie, who says currently obsessed with the Red Rising book series.
I'm not familiar with that.
Not familiar with it. Also, Yvonne says...
Well, hold on. Christian, tell us more. Send us a note so we know what is Red Rising book series. We may just be out of touch. Just ask Resin 8. How often we are out of touch with things. All right, continue on.
We also got a text from Yvonne that says, obsessed with watching something very bad is going to happen. It's a terrifying show, but I can't turn away.
I hope, Yvonne, that was because I was talking about it last week and have been. I was obsessed with it. I watched it. Every time somebody would say to me, well, what's going to happen next? I would say something very bad is going to happen. And It's crazy. I will say, Ivana, I watched it, got all the way through it with a friend of mine, my friend Jeff. We watch TV together all the time. And yeah, I liked it a lot. What I liked about it was at the end of each episode, not overdone, but all of a sudden there was another element folded in and you're like, so it definitely knew how to hook you and keep you going forward. I thought the ending was a bit much, but okay. I went for the ride. I enjoyed it.
And I believe we have a couple more obsessions that came in. Current obsession, Monarch, Legacy of Monsters, Season 2 on Apple Plus. Excellent world building on Godzilla, Kong, and the mysterious organizations involved. Great series.
I'll have to take a look at that one. You know, a few years back I went to Broadway and I had to decide what I wanted to see. And what I wanted to see was King Kong the musical. And two reasons. One, I thought, I just got to see this because it was a tragic failure on stage. But also I thought they have a 5-ton puppet of King Kong that was on the show. And I knew it would never tour because it was just too impossible. So I had to see it. I'll tell you, visually, it was pretty amazing what they did technology-wise.
That sounds very cool.
There's my King Kong story for the day.
My British computer guy. I have 2 current obsessions. First is still Survivor. And my second this week is Criminal Record on Apple TV, a gripping London crime drama with Peter Capaldi and Cush Jumbo, slow burn tension, twist, and a case that might not be what it seems.
All right, my British computer guy, I'm going to ask you to do a favor. Give us a call, 713-440-8870. I want to talk to you about Survivor last night. Mr. Beast, give us a call. I'd love to chat with you about that. Not a lot of my friends watch Survivor, so I'm always happy when I hear you're a Survivor fan. I watch it. I've seen all 50 seasons of it.
Amazing. Resonate current, you like that? Resonate current
Got it
obsession.
right.
Making fresh dog treats with mom for weekly farmers markets. Retirement jobs rock.
Oh,
That
that's
is
great.
Awesome.
Ooh, where can we find your treats? What farmers markets? Where do you go? People want to know. Share it with us, okay? Resonate. I just
And
wanted to say his name again.
let's say, or her name, Sean Radigan, my current obsession, ATSC 3.0 Next Gen TV, KUHT is already on the air.
Yay.
Love it.
Yes, it is.
And lastly, Alex Garza, my current obsession this week is trying out a red light therapy bed. LOL, let's see if the hype is real. There you go.
Okay, so the therapy beds, I'm not familiar. I'm familiar with the masks.
The masks.
But so you put your whole body in it and put the red light on?
I guess so.
And Alex, what are you hoping will come from this?
Smoother skin.
Is that what it's for?
Yes.
Or does it taunt your skin? Does it
don't
smooth
know.
your skin? I don't know enough about that technology. Jayla has one for us.
Yes. Jayla says, my current obsession is Pilates. I need my body to be T for summertime. That's right, girl. I hear
Right
you.
there
I
with
see
you. Celeste, what is your current obsession?
Okay, so my current obsession is I binged this docuseries. As y'all know, I last week wasn't feeling well, so I was at home and I actually had a moment to binge a show, and I binged The False Prophet on Netflix, and it is about a former FLDS woman who came out of the that sector of is it Mormonism, Latter-day Saints. Right. And she became an advocate for it within cults, and she started getting in within the community, and it was fascinating. It is absolutely wonderful. It is gripping, and I had the biggest gasp I've ever had when in the final interview, in the confession, when they have this one final, I'm not going to say who it is, and I just was like, I cried. I cheered for the women. And so many times when we look at that community, women are always looked at as like, how do y'all turn on each other? And this is a story of women truly supporting each other.
Huh. Interesting. I'll have to take a look at that one.
It was incredible. Obsessed. Obsessed.
Charles writes on YouTube that his current obsession is Ernie slowly losing his mind as his co-hosts leave. I got news for you. It ain't happened slowly. It's going fast here. I'm losing my mind. My British computer guy writes back, says, oh my God, Ernie, I would love to call and talk about Survivor, but I'm not caught up yet, so no spoilers. Plus, I'm shy. Okay, no spoilers. I only did a little bit. Mr. Beast, that's all I'll say.
Okay, Ernie. what is your current obsession?
Oh, you all know. I am obsessed. We are getting closer every day to Eurovision, the Eurovision Song Contest. And I have to tell you that our producer, Jimbo, wrote me and said Eurovision lacks widespread popularity in the U.S. largely because Americans don't compete. We're not in the contest. The contest is not marketed domestically, and it competes with the entrenched American talent shows like American Idol. While it has a niche following, the complex voting, which is really kind of crazy, the high camp nature, and the Eurocentric focus means it doesn't align with mainstream American pop culture consumption. To which I say, currently, because it's my job, I believe, Celeste, to educate and bring everyone over into the world of Eurovision.
Ernie's job. Okay, Ernie. So I don't know how many people have watched the Eurovision Song Contest.
The movie?
That was a movie, and it is a movie that was released back in 2020. It's comedy musical with Will Ferrell and Rachel McAdams, Dan Stevens in it. Demi Lovato's also in it. And I'm really curious, Ernie. It was also filmed and directed by David Dobkin. Written also by Will Ferrell and Harper Steele. Was it a actual movie or was it a mockumentary?
It was an actual movie, Eurovision Song Contest, The Story of Fire Saga. You got to get the whole thing in there.
Yes.
Yes, but where it may have fallen is people saw it and got exposed to this thing. A lot of people had no idea that there really is a Eurovision. They thought it was just a made-up, ridiculous thing.
Right.
No, the show is kind of, in some ways, crazy, ridiculous, extreme. But the problem, I think, was that Eurovision itself goes to the extreme so often in the acts and what they present and all that, that to make a parody of it is very hard to do because it's already funny enough in what it is and entertaining enough. So I think that was the challenge they had. But also Will Ferrell loves Eurovision also, as I do. And I think so it was kind of a love letter to it at the same time trying to be a parody of it. And I think that kind of gets lost.
Yes.
But there are some great one-liners, and you know my connection with Downton Abbey. And so one of the stars of the movie was in Downton Abbey, and so you've got that connection.
I also think people don't realize that there have been quite a few big music artists that have come out of Eurovision. ABBA.
Yeah, I'm just thinking about this right now. You can't talk with me about it in 2 weeks when it actually happens because you'll be gone. So this is your last chance to talk to me about Eurovision.
But I will be at your Eurovision party.
You will. If people want to come, it's at the Montrose Country Club. It's free and open to anyone. And it's 1 o'clock onward, 1 to about 5 or 6.
And it's so fun.
Yes, ABBA came out of it. Celine Dion came out of it.
Celine Dion.
Maneskin, who's a popular band, rock band today with the younger kids, they came through it. A lot of acts. The song Volare, oh, from the 60s, that was a Eurovision song. So there's a lot that comes out of it.
See, Jimbo, there's a lot of history
See,
there.
Jim, you were wrong on
he
that
shakes
one.
his head like
My
no.
current obsession, says a text, is watching a show called Stranger Things. You may not have heard of that one. And playing VR. So Stranger Things, its final season was dropped.
And Garrett says current obsession, Beef season 2 on Netflix. I've heard it's fantastic. Also, and he says me and my wife binged it over the weekend.
I have been watching it. I watched the first season, and I'm only 3 episodes into season 2, but I have a funny feeling I'll be watching that tonight because I've got care for my mom, and I'm home alone, and I'm going to be eating bad food and watching TV.
That is the best
things I love
feeling.
to do. Jim, as we were talking about Jim, our executive producer, was talking about he is watching Hacks, which is another great show.
Did you start it, Jim? I've been watching Hacks based on a recommendation from Mr. Ernie Manouse.
Mr. Ernie Manouse, very official here. When it gets into some of the later seasons, it very much parallels our lives in a lot of ways.
Oh, Nana Muscuri.
Did she write?
No. My British computer says also Nana Muscuri.
Nana Muscuri, biggest selling female recording artist of all time. Another European. She was in Eurovision in 1958, maybe something like that. She has a new song out. She's 92 years old, and it's a duet with Nina Hagen, a punk rock star out of Germany in the 80s. Just an odd thing. I was a bit obsessed with that, and I was listening to that nonstop for a little bit. It's a religious folk song. So
I love that.
Yeah, there you go.
But again, thank you for sending in your current obsessions. You can send those all week long at talk@hellohouston.org.
Yep, and I'm currently obsessed with Celeste because I love my Celeste.
I love you. Tomorrow is my last day on Hello Houston, but it's just a simple see you later, not a goodbye. But
that brings us to the end of our show, then.
That brings us to the end of our show. We want to thank you for joining us today on Hello Houston. We're going to have more conversations tomorrow. We're going to just discuss a new economic report about Houston. This is News 88.7. We'll see you tomorrow.
So long.
Thanks for listening to Hello Houston. Join us every Monday through Friday from 11 a.m. to 1 p.m. to talk all things Houston. The Hello Houston production team includes Garrett Bowman, William Menjivar, Jen Altide, Todd Holslander, and Jim Kovacic. For the latest in local news, subscribe to the Hello Houston daily newsletter at houstonpublicmedia.org. Hello Houston is a production of Houston Public Media. The opinions expressed by the guests of this program are solely their own and do not represent the views of management, staff, or underwriters of Houston Public Media. This is News 88.7.
Sometimes dreams can feel totally lifelike, other times totally bizarre. Either way, dreams